So welcome everyone to the first session of MES thesis presentations. We're going to have 4 of these during the next 2 weeks, and this is an incredibly exciting time for the program because you all get to see what you all have been doing over the last year. And I think all the faculty, and I'm sure all of you know how much work you've been putting into this. So anyway, welcome to everyone. Thank you to all the folks from outside the MES program who are here to learn and support our students. And basically, the format is that the thesis reader, the advisor, is going to introduce each student, and then we'll hear about this exciting work. Miranda.
Hi, yes, welcome everyone. Such a feeling of excitement in the air. I'm very proud to introduce my thesis advisees this afternoon and this culminating moment of their deep work. I'll first introduce Emily Passarelli, who has studied marine biology and Belizean culture in Belize. Emily double majored in environmental studies and theater at Knox College and coordinates Roots of Success and beekeeping at the SPP.
Hi everybody, thanks so much for being here today. My name is Emily Passarelli and I'm so excited to share my thesis findings with you. So my research is titled Becoming Environmentalist, Previously Incarcerated Individuals' Experiences with Science and Sustainability in In-Prison Programs. So first I wanted to start off and talk a little bit about where I started with this idea. Climate change is no longer a problem of the future, it's a problem now, and we're starting to see the effects now. And knowing that, environmental interest is actually decreasing. Less people are wanting to be associated with the environmental movement and wanting to be called environmentalists. And the people who are going to suffer the most from the effects of climate change are vulnerable populations. So people like homeless people and single mothers and poorer communities and communities of color. For example, if there's a really extreme weather event, something knocks somebody's house down, an average citizen might take a little bit of time to get back on their feet, but somebody like a single mother might spend a lot of time trying to find permanent housing again. And with that in mind, most environmentalists end up being white, educated, richer people. And so these are the people who are coming up with these policies and these ideas. So the people who are really being affected aren't getting their voices heard. So this led me to think about the resilience of the environmental movement. If something that's so white and so not diverse is happening, how can it be healthy and effective? So I was looking at this idea of resilience theory, which is usually used in ecosystem biology. And it's this idea that an ecosystem is, when it's more diverse, it's healthier, it's more effective, it's more adaptable. And I wondered, well, if the environmental movement was more diverse, would that make it more effective and adoptable and adaptive? And so that led me to think more about my job. So I work with the SPP, the Sustainability in Prisons Project, and that is a partnership between the Evergreen State College and the Washington Department of Corrections. And so our goal is to bring science and nature and education into prisons. And it provides different opportunities for job experiences, for work while they're in prison and afterwards to add to their resumes. Education experience, so sometimes you can get college credit for these kind of jobs. And these programs are in every prison in the state. And they can show up as composting, recycling, educational programs like Roots of Success, which I'll talk a little bit more about, lecture series and endangered species programs. And at this point, it's no secret that prisons are disproportionately people of color. So something like 14% of the US population is African American people. But they make up about 40% of the prison populations. And usually, typically when people end up leaving prison and re-entering society, they don't always have the tools they need to succeed. They maybe have still no job experience, no education experience. Maybe they're going back into the same support system they were in before, so they're really set up sometimes to fail. And these kind of programs can help them have some tools to succeed and make themselves more viable to survive. So this led me to my research question, which is, what are the lasting attitude and identity shifts that occur in formerly incarcerated individuals after participating in prison educational environmental programs? So first I wanted to talk about the two programs that I mostly focused on. So first is Roots of Success, which is this environmental literacy program. So it's this 10-module, 50-hour class, and it goes through, it's pretty much a crash course in environmental studies. And it's really unique because the instructors are incarcerated themselves. So usually in the room, there's not even a staff person present, sometimes depending on the facility. But it really gives them a chance to talk as a group and come to community-based solutions of these problems, these environmental problems. And it's really rigorous too. They spend a lot of time and a lot of work making sure they get some presenting time, and they have these big workbooks that they work through. And it's in most of the Washington State prisons. We've had over 1,000 graduates. Next is the Endangered Species programs. So there's 3 of those, but only 2 of them are active right now. So first is the Taylor's checker spot butterfly, which can be found at Mission Creek Correction Center for Women. And that involves this endangered butterfly. They rear it and they breed it, and then they release it back into specific prairies. And that's pretty much their everyday. They go in there every single day and really bond with these animals. Next is the western pond turtle, which, so they have this shell disease that they wouldn't survive without extra help. So they go into prisons, and they're there in 2 men's prisons. And they clean them and give them a safe and healthy environment to grow and to get healthy again. And then they are also released back into the environment. And the Oregon Spotted Frog program is really similar to the butterfly program in that it's kind of rearing and breeding the frogs, but that one's not currently active. And these are also really rigorous programs. They spend a lot of time partnering directly with scientists and community partners. They're asked to help with research and to read different scholarly articles, so it's pretty rigorous. So to answer the question about what lasts after being in these programs, I decided to interview 8 formerly incarcerated individuals, and they were involved in those couple programs. And I ended up analyzing these interviews using this well-established idea or method of phenomenology, which is just kind of looking through interviews and looking at themes and picking out the most important and relevant themes. And I also had all of the 8 participants do a demographic survey. And I found that I actually had a pretty diverse group of people. Out of the 8, 3 of them identified as African American, 3 identified as white, 1 identified as Hispanic, and 1 identified as Asian. That's a pretty decent group for 8 people. And so besides phenomenology, I also decided to take a look at my interviews and what I was finding and compare them to 3 different theories about how identities are formed. Because I ended up really focusing more on environmental identity and how these people are building and creating this environmental identity. So the first one I looked at is this environmental identity that looks at pro-environmentalism. So how do people get to the point where they start taking action? How do you get somebody who's never recycled anything to start recycling? And so this theory focuses on these 3 different ideas, these kind of criteria. So first is you have to change your view of the environment. So you kind of have to change it from looking at the environment as a resource to seeing it as an entity with moral standing, seeing it as something that is worth respect and protecting outside of it's just useful to us. Next is a connection to the environment, so really seeing yourself in the environment and seeing what it does to you and what you do to it. And finally is social recognition, so bringing it into your life more regularly, talking to people about it, positive reinforcement. And so this quote is from a Roots of Success instructor, and I'll read it to you. It hit home because when I was learning about these landfills, or these places where they would burn a lot of stuff, they just so happened to be in lower income communities. I learned that they affect minorities the most, so me, and people like me. That is the information that I share the most. You're just more aware, and you just want to share it with other people. Like, listen, this is what's going on right now. these places are being built in our communities that we grew up in, and we're not getting involved enough to protest or even make an argument against why we don't want this. So I see at least the last two bullet points in this quote itself. He definitely talked about his change of view of the environment in other ones, but I just thought that this was a nice quote that kind of captured that. So the next theory I looked at was social practice theory. And this is another theory that's focused on environmental identity itself. And so this is the idea that people develop identities based on who they're around and what their environment's like. And this also had, instead of criteria, it's more like 3 levels. So the top bullet point is maybe level 1 and level 2 and level 3. So first is an increased salience of environmental problems. So you really start to not only understand and have this awareness, but it really seems relevant to you. These environmental problems are relevant. Next is a sense of responsibility. And then figuring out how to take action and how to make things move forward. And this quote is from a former butterfly technician. And she said, "We had a couple exhibitions over at the wildlife sanctuary, and there was a lot of Facebook interactions about it. People were very negative. They said, endangered species are not for human entertainment. They're for the wild. Well, in the wild, they're getting slaughtered, so I kind of feel like I need to be an advocate. And I did respond to many of those people, which is something I never would have done before. And I tried to educate them slightly about what a keystone species is, and that there's 2 sides to every story." So I think this is a really good representation of all 3 of those things. She's clearly taking responsibility and making herself get out there and be an advocate, while also this must feel really relevant to her. And then the final theory that I looked at was self-determination theory. And this is actually not an environmental identity theory. This is just kind of a theory just about identity in general. But I kind of felt like something was missing from those other 2. From my interviews, people were really talking about how important the support that they were getting from the staff and the SPP people and the other people around them. It seemed that there was something more social that really wasn't being captured in those other 2 theories. So this one is the idea that if you have a really healthy and safe environment, that people really just are naturally motivated to act in healthier and effective ways. So these 3 points are the 3 things that people need to feel like they're in a good environment. So first is autonomy, feeling free to act, feeling free to make decisions, which I think is really interesting to think about in a prison setting. Competence, so feeling capable and competent. And then relatedness, feeling connected to not only the work, but maybe the people around you and feeling like you're part of something that's really important. And so this quote, I thought captured this too. And this is also a former butterfly technician. "When I first got to the program, in comparison to the end, I could see myself change. Maybe the others couldn't, but I was really abrupt or more rough. Also that has to do with the side effects of coming off with drugs, but as time went on and I'm working with this butterfly and it's delicate and it has all these scales on it and you don't want to hurt it. So I had to learn how to be gentle all over again, how to be calm. And I was just coming to this peaceful calm. I didn't have to be so crazy all the time." So I think it's pretty obvious from this quote that she found a place of solitude and peace working here, and she created an environment that worked for her, that allowed her to create this new identity. And then I have one more quote that I thought worked with this. I had so many great quotes, so I could only pick a couple, but this is a different butterfly technician who said, "It taught me a lot about myself. I felt really unappreciated and I wasn't good at what I was doing. And then this all reminded me, you're a good person and you're doing the right thing. So having programs like this really teaches them and gives them confidence that they need to say, hey, I don't need that world anymore. There's a whole other world that's open to me and I'm capable of surviving in it." I thought that was a pretty profound quote, just to see that they are capable and that they are competent to live out in the world without whatever they were doing before. So in conclusion, it looks like environmental identities really are being formed and that they are lasting at least a couple years after being in these programs. It'd be interesting to look in the future and see what they're up to in the future and if they are still pursuing the environmental movement. And that, in addition to that, people actually are pursuing environmental education and environmental careers. And lastly, participants are really taking what they've learned and sharing it with their families and their communities, which I think is probably one of the most important parts. And so while there were a couple limitations, 2 out of the 8 said they don't identify as environmentalists. That probably had something to do with the way the program was working and running. It was a pilot program at the time, so there's probably some kinks. And it was also a really small sample size, so it'd be interesting to look in the future and talk to more people, because Roots of Success has had 1,000 graduates, I only got 3. So it'd be interesting to look back and see what they're up to in the future too. Thanks so much. And I'm happy to take any questions. I covered it all.
I was curious about the quotes. So all of the butterfly people were women?
Yes.
In the women's prison?
So that-
3 of the 4 quotes were from women. I was just curious if you noticed any gender-related differences or...
Yeah, so it was actually kind of tricky because I only had 1 male who was in an endangered species program. And it seems like the endangered species programs really had a pretty huge transformative effect on people. They were overcoming fears, they were figuring out how to talk to media and how to do all these other things. And I really only had a couple people who were in the Roots of Success program, and they definitely still had environmental identity, and it appeared that they did make changes to their lives. But it didn't seem to be at the same degree as these people who were going every single day and working with this animal. But it's somewhat expected, and it's also, the program was really new at that time. But yeah, I got some great quotes from everybody, and I wish I could have included all of them, but it seemed like the people who worked with the endangered species had a more transformative effect, for sure. Yeah.
Hi.
Hey.
Excellent work.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. So, interesting question about gender.
Mhm.
My question is, how does environmental identity kind of transform with race?
Mhm.
You mentioned lower income and people of color. Like, how do different people identify in your experience?
No, that's a great question, because seeing that environmentalists are generally richer white people just means it's becoming a white problem, and it's like this elitist group that other people don't want to be part of. I even heard one of my interviewees said that it's considered a white problem and that they'll take care of it. So people aren't feeling like there's not enough representation. People probably don't see people who look like themselves and act like themselves doing environmental work. For instance, I said that 2 of the guys felt like they weren't environmentalists, and they were both 2 black guys. And they said they were comparing themselves to the creator of Roots of... Well, one of them was comparing themselves to the creators of Roots of Success, who are just like environmental superstars, like people that, really devote their entire life to this. And they're like, oh, I can't be a environmentalist because I don't see myself like that. So maybe there needs to be some more representation of people who really look and act like average people, maybe. But yeah, did I answer your question really? Okay, so how does it work with race?
Right.
Yeah.
So, yeah, like how do people kind of like, how has it transformed like different people's lives? Because
Mhm.
like you said, white, elitist, I think money.
Right.
And kind of switching like economics and like kind of more business stuff,
Mhm.
more science stuff, whereas I see more transformative, at least from your talk, like the neutrality, or like just the experience of working with something of nature was transformative to their identity.
Yeah,
As people.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, it seems that working with some kind of living animal and really nurturing it and bringing it, like healing it or breeding it or whatever that is, has really had some really profound effects on people. People were saying, I used to step on every bug I see, and now when I see a spider, I don't kill it. So it shifts into empathy. Like, pretty profound things are happening to people in these programs. Sorry, Kevin.
No. So you've spent a lot of time with Roots of Success, the curriculum, and kind of shepherding that over the last few years. I'm wondering if your research has influenced how you think about that as a curriculum, and whether your research, like, you have any advice or feedback that you would give about the curriculum for the next iteration of it, or kind of that sort of feedback.
Yeah, it would be interesting. So I haven't seen every video of Roots of Success. There's probably almost 200 videos in that class. And I know that a lot of them end up just not working or skipping or being just kind of bad quality videos. So it'd be interesting to see newer, updated ones that involve more regular people rather than maybe the best of the best of the environmental world. Yeah, that's mostly my main critique, I think, and I would really have to sit down and watch all of the videos before I could even say that to them, but that seems to be what the people of Roots of Success thought, the people who were in that class thought too.
So how difficult was it to translate science to plain talk when you're communicating with people who are different, who have different life experiences, who have different backgrounds, who have those kind of things? Was it a challenge? Did you find it had to happen?
By science, do you mean when I was talking to my interviewees and?
I think even in Roots of Success or in the day-to-day interactions with the butterfly program stuff, did you find that you had to translate? Because science for a lot of us is difficult.
Right.
Because we don't understand the technical terminologies. Did you translate that, or did you have to translate that for them to grasp what you're talking about?
Yeah, so I don't teach Roots of Success, and I've sat in on a couple classes and I've gone to graduations, but I haven't really had science lectures with them. So I actually haven't really had the experience of communicating science in between myself and an incarcerated individual. And I didn't notice any difficulties in interviewing them either. And I mean, granted, they'd gone through the classes and they'd known everything by then anyway. So I guess I can't really answer that question, but Keegan's in here somewhere. And I bet he's the butterfly coordinator for SPP, and I bet he probably knows how to communicate science to people who've never really done it before. But yeah, I'm sorry, I don't really have a great answer to that one.
I'm going to take that as a moment to say thank you very much.